Okay, great. I think it's time to just start off there and people will continue to trickle in over the next minute or two. So thank you to everyone for coming today. My name's Aileen and I'm just going to introduce session two's chair before we get started. So Hazel Gibson is the name of our chair, who is the Communications Officer for the European Geosciences Union, or EGU. Hazel has a PhD in Geoscience, Cognition and Communication from the University of Plymouth, and has previously worked extensively researching the public perception of geoscience and subsurface environments. She's also worked in the science communication for over 12 years, including at the Natural History Museum in London, at Mount St. Helens National Volcanic Monument, which is very cool, in the USA. And she is a passionate advocate for greater inclusion of underrepresented groups in geoscience, seeking to elevate the voices of those who are so often excluded. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Hazel, and I hope you all enjoy our session.
Thanks very much, Aileen. That's great. So hello, everyone. My name's Hazel, as I was just introduced, and I want to welcome you all to session 2 of the EDIG 2020 conference. This session aims to take a closer look at the challenges and barriers to entry into our field that many geoscientists from underrepresented minorities experience, and to help raise awareness of these issues in the larger community. In this discussion, we will explore diversity, unconscious bias, intersectionality, and allyship, setting the scene for session 3, where future-focused action will be discussed. We want to help people become more familiar with how we can make geosciences more accessible for everyone, and to discuss how it can be difficult to separate out these issues as they're often merged. For the audience members, you can ask questions of the panelists in the Q&A box if you're watching via Zoom, or in the YouTube comments section if you're watching there. But please be aware that we might not be able to ask the panelists all of your questions, although we will try to get to as many as we can. All EDIG sessions are being run in line with their stated code of conduct, and by participating in this event, you're agreeing to follow these rules. More information on the code of conduct is available online, but at its most fundamental, we ask that all participants are respectful and accommodating and value the diversity of views and opinions of all participants, as well as being open to learning. This session is being recorded, and the recordings will be made publicly available in the new year. So I would like to start today's session by introducing the first speaker, and that speaker is Sue Lomas. So Sue Lomas is, before I introduce the speaker, I should outline how the session is going to work. That was one thing I forgot to do. So what we're going to do in this session is we're going to have several speakers present pre-recorded videos on their specific topics that were outlined in the sessions. And following that, we are going to have an approximately half an hour, 40-minute panel discussion where the panelists will answer questions that arose out of their talks, but also will be able to answer the questions from yourself in the audience too. So now I will actually start with the first introduction, Sue Lomas. So Sue Lomas is a professional geologist who has 32 years in mining and mineral exploration and has worked in over 30 countries throughout her career as a consultant. She is the president of Lionsgate Geological Consulting Incorporated and specializes in 3D geological modeling and resource estimation. In 2018, she founded Me Too Mining Association to start a conversation about sexualized violence, sexual harassment, racism, bullying, intimidation, and discrimination in the mining, mineral exploration, and mining impacted communities. The Me Too Mining Association has focused on bystander intervention strategies and has built the DIGGER program for workers to intervene safely when inappropriate workplace behaviors happen to them or in their presence. DIGGER stands for Direct Actions, Indirect Actions, Get a Co-worker, Get an Authority, Engage with the Target, Record and Report. Workplace allyship is an additional pathway towards safe, respectful, and inclusive workplaces. In 2018, Susan was honored to be included in the list of the 100 Inspirational Women in Mining by Women in Mining UK. So we will now start her presentation.
Apologies, there is no sound for that video. I messed up the sharing, so I'm just going to reshare again. Just bear with us. This will not happen again. Thanks everyone and enjoy.
Companies can and should provide training and support for both of them. Hi everyone. This presentation is part of a much longer talk, so if you want more information about the Me Too Mining Association, then please have a look at our website. And this talk is about building and supporting safe, inclusive, and respectful workplaces through workplace allies and active bystander strategies. Companies can and should provide training and support for both of these powerful tools, but individual workers can also self-activate and strengthen these skills for the benefit of themselves, their co-workers, and their workplaces. I hear stories from workers in the geosciences and mining, and they often include these phrases. This happened to me, and I didn't know what to do. I saw this happen, and I didn't know what to do. So Me Too Mining Association is asking everybody to step out of silence and step into action when inappropriate workplace behaviors happen to them or in their presence. Some institutions and mining companies are working harder than ever to increase gender diversity, but progress is challenging and slow. In Canada, the mining workforce has increased from 13% women in 1987 to only 18% in 2019. And I'm going to suggest that a portion of the reason for this is likely related to workplace culture that can be aggressive, unsafe, and unwelcoming. I have been a geologist for 33 years, and I want to be clear, I have had some incredible and wondrous experiences and gotten to travel to over 30 different countries. But I have also at times been in real physical danger. I have been sexually harassed, physically assaulted, threatened, bullied, and discriminated against while at my place of work. So to increase diversity, we want workers from many differing underrepresented groups to join the mining industry, and we want them to be accepted, safe, and included, and importantly, we want them to stay and thrive. We feel that two pathways to achieve this diversity, inclusion, and retention goals are creating and supporting strong networks of workplace allies, and through the empowerment of workers in active bystander intervention strategies. An article in the Harvard Business Review, Be a Better Ally, stated, quote, "For too long, leaders from majority groups have helped preserve the status quo, which favors them by relegating diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts to human resources instead of using their own power to effect change," unquote. It is not sufficient to divert responsibility for inclusion and diversity to others and be satisfied that it is being taken care of. It is up to everyone, but especially those who are not part of the underrepresented group, to be a workplace ally. Institutional and corporate change starts with leaders taking responsibility for their own attitudes and behaviors. Effective allies educate themselves first and then listen with respect to their co-workers when they speak about challenges they have experienced. Allies build trust with their co-workers and let them know that they can confide in them about inappropriate workplace behaviors and attitudes they encounter. Allies need to advocate, mentor, and sponsor talented workers from entirely different racial, gender, or cultural backgrounds and get to know them, challenge, and encourage them. Allies need to step towards action and drive systemic workplace changes to policies, practices, and culture. And mining is classified as a male-dominated industry, and most male workers in mining are respectful and support their co-workers. But we really need this majority to step up and step out of their comfort zones and become male allies. But there is a problem, and studies have found that men may not observe or experience the workplace the same as women workers do. A 2019 study of corporations in the US found that 42% of women reported some sort of gender discrimination in their workplace, while 85% of men in the same companies did not perceive a problem with gender discrimination, and 38% of women reported being sexually harassed in the workplace, while 77% of the men reported that sexual harassment was not a problem in their company. So clearly, this study shows there is a disconnect between the perceptions on inclusion and workplace safety by men and the lived experience of women. And it is important to remember that if you are not seeing inappropriate behaviors, you cannot assume that they are not happening to your coworkers. And we also need to talk about female allies because we are such important role models. More senior women in male-dominated industries tend to have accumulated many layers of armor over the years. We have moved our careers forward, found ways through, over, and around obstacles, and sometimes we forget that it should not have been so hard. We should build a better path for the next generation and should not dismiss their complaints because we had no one to complain to. We should not dismiss their pain because we denied our own. We need to remove our armor, be our authentic selves, support each other, and ensure that we all move forward together. Another important ally is the active bystander, sometimes called an upstander. Everyone who is listening can learn about actions to help themselves or support a coworker. And it starts with an individual who notices or hears about a problematic situation and takes action. And once the safety of the situation has been assessed, the bystander can go down the digger list to the action that matches the level of threat in any situation. If it is safe to do so, use bold and direct statements, but do not attack the harasser. You could say things like, "That is not funny. That is not okay. Leave them alone right now. Leave me alone right now." And it is important to find the phrases that you are comfortable using and to practice saying them so that they are there at the ready when you need them. Then we have indirect actions such as interrupt, distract, or disrupt, where, if possible, walk away with the target or the harasser if you know them, or drop something, spill a drink. Anything to break up the focus and provide an opportunity for an exit. The 2 G's in Digger are get a coworker or get an authority. So if safety is becoming an increasing issue, then get some support. And if someone is being threatened, then get security, a supervisor, or call the local authorities. And engaging with the target is the most important action an active bystander can take. Simply asking, "Are you okay?" can dispel a lot of negative impacts. You could also say things like, "I saw what happened to you. Is there anything I can do?" And finish it with, "I'm going to send you an email with what I saw." And the R's in Digger also are important. It is critical to keep a record of all incidents that are experienced or witnessed, because documentation supports the reporting process, provides evidence of escalation, and can amass a record of events that is not easy to dismiss or discount. Write down the who, what, where, and when, and keep copies of all forms of communication, whether electronic, record voicemails, photograph graphic images, and write down all emotional and physical reactions. And if you use an email, ensure that you use a personal one and not a company or institutional-based email account. And finally, the hardest one of all, find an outlet to report what has happened. It is important to file a report with your company, institution, or association, and research shows that 75% of sexual harassment in the workplace goes unreported. And companies are claiming they have no issue in their workplace. Studies also show that this can be a futile and even risky action for the target to take, and we acknowledge that. And there are other options for reporting an incident that are external, and they can include your union if you are a member. Seek legal counsel from an employment specialist lawyer. They can provide support and a pathway forward. And file a complaint with an appropriate professional association if a registered professional is the perpetrator. Courage is a key ingredient for change. There is always going to be discomfort, and repercussions can happen when we speak truth to power, challenge norms, and challenge inappropriate behaviors. But courage is about acting despite the risks. By overcoming our own fears and reservations, we can empower others around us and impact the workplace in positive ways, while inaction can signal acceptance. Become an ally to an underrepresented person and be an active bystander when inappropriate behaviors happen in your workplace. If you want to sign up for our newsletter or get further information, then please visit our website, metoomining.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, for that wonderful pre-recorded talk. We will get to questions at the end with the panel session, so please do send in your questions using the Q&A tab or the YouTube comment section wherever you are watching. I will now move on to our second speaker, which is Dr. Koheli Dutt. And Koheli Dutt is the Assistant Director for Academic Affairs and Diversity at Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory at Columbia University, and serves as the Diversity and Academic Affairs Officer and leads the diversity, equity and inclusion efforts at the university. Dr. Dutt has a PhD in public policy, and her research focuses on implicit bias, gender and STEM diversity. She has published extensively on this topic, including her research work, Gender Differences in Recommendation Letters for Postdoctoral Fellowships in Geoscience, her book, Women in the Geosciences, and various opinion pieces, including Race and Racism in the Geosciences, How Implicit Bias and the Lack of Diversity Undermine Science, and Promoting Racial Diversity in Geoscience Through Transparency. Dr. Dutt was also a co-author on the Guide to Inclusive Scientific Meetings, published jointly by the Earth Science Women's Network and 500 Women Scientists, and her guidelines on avoiding gender bias in recommendation letters can be found on the American Geophysical Union's Ethics and Equity website. Dr. Dutt's work has been covered by several media venues, including NPR Science Friday, the New York Times, the Huffington Post, Scientific American, Nature and Science, amongst many others. She has presented to national and international audiences on STEM, diversity and implicit bias, and serves on the International Advisory Board for Gender Equality at the University of Southern Denmark. Dr. Dutt has also served on several panels, committees and workshops pertaining to STEM diversity, and has given invited talks and presentations at various venues around the world. I will now start her talk.
Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are, and thank you for attending today's session. Today I'll be talking about race and racism in the context of underrepresented groups in geoscience. Now, geoscience is one of the least diverse STEM fields, as you might know, and we have comparable scenarios for the US and the UK. So in the US, we use the term underrepresented minority. That refers to people who are Black or Hispanic, Latinx, or Native Indigenous, Pacific Islander, Native Hawaiian, and typically this excludes Asian people. In the UK, you use the term Black, Asian, and Minority Ethnic, or BAME, and underrepresented groups account for a very small percentage of geoscience PhDs, and the geosciences are predominantly a white discipline, at least in the Western world. And leadership positions are often held mostly by straight, white, cisgender, able-bodied men. This image shows the percentage of science and engineering degrees awarded to underrepresented minorities. The purple arrow show the geosciences. As you can see, that's quite low. This image shows the scenario for the UK. Again, the scenario is very similar to the US. Now, research has shown that underrepresented groups, whether it's race or sexual identity or gender, they end up leaving STEM at higher rates than majority and dominant groups. And in the UK, BA/ME students are less likely to get accepted into the prestigious colleges and universities like Oxbridge or LSE or Imperial College compared to white students. In the US, Black students make up only 7 to 8% of the freshman class in Ivy Leagues. There was a study that found that women of color in particular experience the highest levels of harassment. And the concept of intersectionality shows that people with multiple marginalized identities or more than one disadvantaged identity tend to be collectively more disadvantaged. So someone who is, say, a person of color, female, LGBTQ, and has a disability. And when underrepresented groups either end up leaving at a higher rate or having worse experiences than dominant groups, we need to acknowledge the exclusionary culture of many STEM fields, and that includes the geosciences. Now, when we talk about race and racism, there are three broad issues in the geosciences. One is pipeline and accessibility, role models and representation, and culture, which includes implicit bias and stereotypes. Now, when we talk about pipeline, only around 5% of geoscience PhDs are awarded to underrepresented minorities. This is in the US. In the UK, only around 6% of the National Environmental Research Council studentships are awarded to BA/ME. And in terms of accessibility, very often for underrepresented groups, when they hear the word scientist or becoming a scientist, it is often more easily associated with becoming a doctor or an engineer. Geoscience is usually not the first profession that comes to mind. And so we need to promote a larger awareness of the geosciences, of the career aspects, of the contribution to society, of the academic preparation, and so on. Now, when we talk about pipeline, we need to develop pipeline programs to attract underrepresented groups to the geosciences. And I would urge all of you to find ways to develop these pipeline programs in your institutions and departments. Now, there are some key factors that influence whether these students will enter geosciences or not. A sense of belonging, math preparation, geoscience faculty as role models, self-efficacy, self-confidence, positive experiences related to geoscience, and this could be either in the classroom or in the field, and knowledge of the college application process and of geoscience career income and prospects. So when you develop a pipeline program, make sure you look at every one of these points and see and incorporate that into your larger program. Now we come to role models and representation. In the US, less than 4% of faculty are underrepresented minority at the top 100 geoscience institutions. And in the UK, less than 10% BA/ME geoscience faculty, with less than 1% Black professors in the UK higher ed. So not seeing oneself represented among one's peers or at senior levels, or where whiteness is normal, promotes a culture or fosters this culture of exclusion, of not belonging. When we come to culture, geoscience culture typically is not inclusive to underrepresented groups, and this is not just specific to geoscience, it is also other STEM disciplines. So there was a study that found that CVs that had Western or white-sounding names like Greg and Emily got 50% higher callbacks for interviews than identical CVs with ethnic names like Lakeisha and Jamal. In the US, the National Institutes of Health data reveal that Black scientists end up getting less grant funding than similarly qualified white scientists from similar institutions with similar backgrounds. Very often, Black scientists are stereotyped as not being brilliant. And there was a study that found that almost 50% of Black, female, and Latina scientists had been mistaken as janitors and support staff. And this sends a very powerful message about who belongs and who doesn't. Here is the racial bias iceberg. Now, the things that you see at the tip of the iceberg, that's above the waterline, that's visible. The lynchings, the hate crimes, racial slurs, N-word, swastika, KKK, and so on. These are usually overt, visible, actionable, and often illegal. But when you look at the 90% below the waterline, that reflects culture, attitudes, biases, perceptions, things like financial discrimination, housing discrimination, hiring discrimination, implicit bias, racial profiling, and so on. So this is where the larger implicit biases take place. This is where that sort of culture occurs. Very quickly, I'll talk about a pipeline program that we developed at Lamont called the Secondary School Field Research Program, or SSFRP. This is almost entirely Black and brown students. It's underrepresented minority students. So this is an immersive summer program where they do field work, they do labs, they do research groups, they make presentations at the end of the summer, and they're treated pretty much like early career scientists. And this is a hugely successful program where most of our students go on to college, and about 50% of them declare STEM majors and receive merit scholarships. And this helps towards creating a pool of URM geoscientists. And so more geoscience institutions should build similar programs. This is a picture of the students in the lab wearing their lab coats and analyzing water samples. In the inset, you'll see a picture of a senior white man. That's Bob Newton. He's a senior scientist at Lamont. And he's the director of this program, and he devoted many years to building it. And I like to point this out because very often it is underrepresented groups, people of color, women, LGBTQ, who take ownership and bear the burden of DEI work. And this sort of work needs to be equally, needs to be owned just as much by people in senior positions and dominant groups, such as senior white men. So to conclude, underrepresented groups face multiple challenges and barriers to entry within the geosciences. And if we want to recruit and advance these underrepresented groups, we need to approach 3 issues simultaneously. That's pipeline, role models, and culture. And we need to do all 3 together, because just focusing on one and not the others will be counterproductive because they are very closely linked. We need to devote time, energy, and resources. And for meaningful results, these need to be sustained over time. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that excellent pre-recorded talk, Helly. That was wonderful. I'm just going to jump really quickly into the next speaker. Our next speaker is Martin Griffin, who is a principal geotechnical engineer with Cowie. He is dyslexic, dyspraxic, autistic, and partially sighted. These are the conditions which have shaped him, but they don't define who Martin is. He has over 20 years of professional experience with consultancies, working on national and international projects. He is a workplace equality, diversity, inclusion office champion, advocating for disability awareness in our sector. He graduated from Exeter University in 1995 with a 2:1 degree in industrial geology. He is a chartered geologist, a European geologist, a chartered engineer, and a fellow member of the IOM3, awarded for his dedication and work in EDI. Finally, he is a Geological Society scrutineer, a journal peer reviewer for several journals, STEM ambassador who serves in the UK Ground Forum Council and is a mentor to underrepresented groups and work colleagues.
Good morning, one and all. Today I'm going to talk about disability, ableism, including mental health in the geoscience community and society at large. Everybody's normal until you get to know them. As I said, I'm a geologist and engineer, and both mindsets are very different. A geologist can deal with colour, an engineer deals with black and white, quantitative information, designs. As a geologist, we look back in time, the geological history of a region and what's happened in the past. An engineer wants to see what happens in the future. And then I still hear you cry out, Martin Griffin, what right have you got to talk to me today about disability? Well, I'm a comorbid. That is, I live with my disability. I have multiple disabilities 24/7, and this is called intersectionality. I'm partially sighted in both eyes with an eye condition called keratoconus. I'm dyslexic, I'm dyspraxic, I'm autistic, and I have anxiety attacks a lot of the time. And this is how I describe my conditions to an engineer. We're a lot of numbers, and sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. But I explain it and they get it. Often in the EDI world and the geoscience literature, disability is seen as the poor relation, the ugly sister, the ugly duckling, the Cinderella. And hopefully today I can dispel your myths about disability and what it really is and what it really isn't. As an introduction, just some numbers about disability. There are about 1 in 5 to 1 in 3 people who have a disability in the United Kingdom. 1 in 6 people of working age have a diagnosed mental health condition. By 2030, it is expected that 40% of the working age population will have a long-term condition. Mental health costs in the United Kingdom are estimated at 42 billion per annum. Once in employment, the statistics are even more staggering. The gap between employment rates between those who are disabled and those who are non-disabled is 79% and 33% respectively. Yet, disabled people are 3 times more likely to be without a job. Once in a job, 53% of disabled people experience bullying or harassment, and 58% of people who are disabled felt at risk of losing their job. There are various models of disability. Firstly, the medical model of disability. This looks what's wrong with the person, not at the person's needs. It states that disability is caused by various factors, mental, physical, sensory, impairment, and it focuses on the problem and the person is impaired. This model creates low expectation and leads to people losing their independence, choice, and the control of their lives. Closely aligned to the medical model is the social model of disability. The social model says that people who are disabled are by barriers in society, not by their impairment or difference. This model removes these barriers and creates equality and offers disabled people more independence of choice and control. In addition to these two models, there is the ICF model of disability. This is the International Classification of Functioning, Disability and Health. A person's health condition may be the effects on their organs, body parts, and there may be different effects on a person's participation in areas of life. Correspondingly, 3 dimensions of disability are recognised in the ICF: body, structure, and function, and therefore impairments thereof, activity and activity restrictions, participation and participation restrictions. This classification also recognises the role of personal and social environmental factors in affecting disability outcomes. Yet these classifications are very specialists, and not all disabilities can be seen. So never make assumptions. Up to 80% of disabled people have a head-on impairment. Disabilities can broadly be classified as physical, sensory, intellectual, emotional, pervasive developmental, and developmental. And these cover the vast majority of all disabilities. After the Declaration of Rights of Disabled Persons by the United Nations, we've come a long, long way. But have we really? It took 17 attempts to get the Disability Discrimination Act enforcement into the United Kingdom, and then by 2010 the Equality Act. Yet 33% of disabled people are only employed compared to 79% of non-disabled people. The Equality Act and disability protects you from workplace discrimination. It protects you if you're trying to buy goods or use facilities or services. To be protected, if you have one or more protected characteristic. Disability is defined as a physical or mental impairment which has a substantial and long-term adverse effect on your ability to carry out your normal day-to-day activities. And these definitions I've highlighted because they need further explanation. The Equality Act 2010 makes very clear what is not acceptable behaviour towards those who have disability. Direct discrimination, indirect discrimination, discrimination arising from a disability, failure to make reasonable adjustments, harassment, and a victimisation. The definitions on this slide here for future reference. Ableism is the discrimination and social prejudice against people with disabilities based on the belief that typical abilities are superior. It is rooted in the assumption that disabled people require fixing and defines people based on their disability. So let's talk about discrimination and not be fighting about the D word. There's various forms of discrimination: micro-ableism and micro-ableism. How is discrimination manifested in the workplace, geoscience, and society at large? These are micro-ableism and micro-discrimination, which are obvious for who are disabled to see and encounter, yet they are very subtle for those who are non-disabled. And then once a person is a victim and be discriminated against, this often can lead to poor mental health. A mental health condition can contribute to disability or make a disability worse, including dementia, depression, bipolar disorder, OCD, schizophrenia, and anxiety. Disability can contribute to mental health issues due to biology and genetics, a higher incidence of negative life events, increased subtle discrimination and marginalisation, access to fewer resources, and the impact of other people's attitudes. Coupled with that, mental health conditions could worsen for those with disabilities during the recent pandemic crisis due to shortage of medication, isolation rates are higher generally, intense feelings of loneliness. This can lead to increased severe health conditions, discrimination attitudes of others, and worsens anxieties about trying to get medical care or treatment. Does your employer need to know? That's a good question. Well, in my opinion, you can bring your full self to work and it adds more diversity to the workplace. Does an employer need to tell? Ownership helps come up with positive solutions, and it also protects yourself and helps the employer come up with better opportunities more suited to your skill set. When to share, this is your personal choice, depending on your application, the workplace situation, and who you share with is vitally important. Those close to you and your line manager, for example, it's your choice again. Employees and the employer must work together to address any obstacles. Employers and the employees must provide what they want best based on trust. Disabled geoscientists should not be inhibited by barriers in order to maintain a long and fulfilling career. So, challenge your unconscious biases. Don't use ableist language. Don't make assumptions. If you are disabled, ask for help. We shouldn't face it alone. Distinguish the facts from observations and from your own interpretations. You need to speak out if you see something happening. And no matter how dire the situation is, there's no easy way out. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Martin. That was a really, really enlightening talk. I'm going to move straight on to our next speaker. This is Dr. Anjana Katwar, who is an earth scientist and has a BSc in earth science and a PhD in geography. She has published numerous papers on glacial geology, developed award-winning teaching resources, and recently won, with her team, the Royal Geographical Society's Geographical Award for excellence in educating the public about the Jurassic Coast. Anjana has appeared as a regular contributor on many natural history programmes, such as BBC4's Beach Live, The Jurassic Coast Revealed in the UK. She currently works as the Wessex Engagement Lead for Wessex Museums, where she drives forward strategic change to bring underserved audiences into museum spaces. This is her talk.
Hello, I'm Dr. Anjana Katwa, and I'm here to talk to you about how I've navigated and succeeded in rocky spaces with a brown face. I'm an earth scientist, a presenter, but also a champion for equality, diversity and inclusion in the geosciences, geography and the natural heritage sector. I first became interested in geology probably when I was about 11 or 12 years old, and you can see me in this picture here wearing a hat with the white and the blue dress. I was walking across an ancient lava flow, and it just struck me how if that lava was molten rock, my legs would have melted away. It was a real formative experience for me visiting this lava flow on holiday in Kenya with my family, because it made me interested in geology and landscapes and wanting to pursue a career in that field. But what was to happen was to really show me that I was an anomaly in this sector. A recent report by Policy Exchange in 2017 found that only 0.6% of the workforce within the environmental sector was comprised of Black and Asian people. And I would find this throughout my career, that people like myself were hugely underrepresented. And what this does to you over time, and I have a career that spans over 25 years working in academia as a geoscientist and then moving over into natural heritage landscape management, is that you feel isolated and you feel incredibly exposed within spaces where you don't see yourself represented. And that can manifest itself in all sorts of issues like mental health problems, isolation, and this is compounded by a double burden that you carry. So you're not only a minority in the field that you're working in, but in order to progress in those fields, you have to live and work in areas that reflect the sector. So for me, it was living in mostly rural spaces. And when you go into rural spaces, those spaces are predominantly white. So Dorset has a population of 4.4% Black, Asian and minority ethnic people. And so you carry that burden not only in your workplace, but you also carry it in the space in the community that you occupy. So why is it we don't see more Black and Asian people within the geosciences, within the natural heritage sector? A key factor is those early experiences you have as children and how that forms your assumptions of whether you feel like you belong in those spaces. This is a picture of my daughter on a walk on the Jurassic Coast, and she's very lucky because I live here. I'm able to take her out. I'm confident of walking in the landscape. But for many Black and Asian communities and children growing up in those communities, this is not the case. There's a huge disparity, a gulf of experiences that those communities have with the natural landscape. And you heard my story. You heard how that formative experience of walking across that lava flow made me want to become a geologist. So if we are not helping children and young people from deprived backgrounds, from Black and Asian communities come into natural spaces, how will we expose them to this wonderful landscape and be inspired by the beautiful colours and textures and landscapes that rocks underpin? A core part of that fear and that isolation from nature comes from those people around us in the landscape who assume that we don't belong, who are surprised to see us there, that we are unexpected and unusual. And when the government published a report called the DEFRA Protected Landscapes Review last year, and when it was showcased on a Countryfile episode, which is a programme in the UK, there was a huge backlash against a Black man asking for more equity of access for Black and Asian communities to enter natural spaces. There is an assumption that nature is open to everybody, but actually it isn't. If you're disabled, if you're Black, if you're Asian, if you're LGBTQ+, or even a woman, you can often feel quite unsafe in spaces where you don't see yourself reflected. And the microaggressions that you experience, from racism to stares to looks to being made to feel uncomfortable, can really impact on that experience in nature, and therefore kind of make you feel like you don't belong there. And ultimately that has an impact on children and young people not accessing those spaces and not wanting to be part of that culture, that workforce that looks after and communicates the value of these spaces to others. When we talk about particularly young people like undergraduates entering that space in universities or even later the workforce, there's a really key thing that you're exposed to, which is unconscious bias. And 73% of the respondents that came back in the EDIG questionnaire said that they had experienced this within the workplace. Those unconscious biases really are all about whether you belong in the space that you're in, and the kind of assumptions made about who you are and what is expected from you. And when we look at this kind of leaky pipeline of the loss of diverse people within our sector, it shows you how clear it is those impacts that unconscious bias, that microaggressions have on the progression of people through the system. So say, for example, you enter an organisation as a fresh geology graduate, you've already, a geology graduate who's diverse, you've already had to experience all that isolation that being in a white sector brings to that experience. And as you go through the pipeline, if you're not supported, if you experience those microaggressions, you'll lose confidence in wanting to be in that space and you'll drop out of the career. And as we go further up the pipeline, you know, if you're not supported, you'll see more and more diverse people drop out of the system. So ultimately, as you come further through, particularly to more senior levels, the whole space is dominated, particularly by white people. Maybe you're the only one there. And unless you're supported and you're helped by allies within the organisation, you eventually will also drop out. And then the impact this has on the sector is that those diverse people come together and they share those experiences, and those rumours and those experiences that are circulated around can often have reputational damage on organisations. And then this impacts on how we recruit more diverse people into the sector. So it's almost like a cyclical pattern. We have to address how we can support and encourage diverse people to be attracted to the sector and also stay within it. So when we look at these barriers to attracting diverse people, and by this I mean in a very intersectional approach, women, Black, Asian, LGBTQ+, disabled people into the geosciences, what are we really looking at? We have a huge lack of role models that diverse people can look towards to see their voices and their faces being championed. There's a real unfamiliarity with what the geosciences can offer in terms of a career. And this goes back to that lack of engagement with nature at a very early age. So how do we kind of begin to start to change what the outcomes are for encouraging more diversity within the geosciences? Firstly, we need our leaders to become more inclusive, not only with their thoughts, but their actions. We need to see more diverse governance on boards. We need to see more diverse people in senior positions, because as we start to influence those senior people, we start to see those attitudes filtering through organizations. Within organizations, we need to enable and empower diverse voices, whether that's listening to those lived experiences, whether that's platforming them through specialist support groups and actually giving them roles within the organisation that allow them to flourish, mentorship, support from senior leaders. This is how we can begin to champion those voices. There are huge influencers out there that we can use to highlight careers within the geosciences, and we need to do more of this to expose career pathways and the fact that we as a sector are welcome and open to diverse people coming in and kind of really championing what it means to be a geoscientist. Crucially, we need to work with our allies. We need to train our fellow white colleagues to be champions for our voices so that they speak speak up for us where we may not necessarily have a platform rather than speaking for us. Allyship is a really critical factor in our sector. And it's so critical because we know that the majority of our sector is white. So we need to build those allies and empower them with confidence and the ability to call out racism or discrimination wherever they see it. And we need our allies to stand by our diverse colleagues to support them when they need it. It's by using all of these different aspects of inclusive thought leadership that will try to create a change in our sector that's so desperately needed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anjana, for that really inspiring talk. I'm going to move straight on again. Our next speaker is Dr. Brooke Johnson. Dr. Brooke Johnson has collected rocks and fossils from the North Yorkshire coast since he was a wee lad. After a bit of a detour, he completed his BSc in geology at Birkbeck College, University of London in 2015. Following this, he completed a PhD in geology at the University of Oxford in 2020. His work uses sedimentary rocks as an archive for environmental chemistry and change to try and understand the co-evolution of life and Earth's surface environments over the last 1.3 billion years. He's also very keen on outreach and bringing Earth science to those who don't usually have access to it through school visits and his YouTube channel, Geology Johnson. Here's his talk.
Hi there, my name is Brooke and I'm a geologist at the University of Oxford in the UK. I teach Earth Sciences at St Anne's College, St Edmund Hall and St Peter's College. And then I research billion-year-old mud to find out if there was enough nutrients for eukaryotes and complex cells in the ancient oceans. Today I'm going to talk to you about what it was like going into higher education and then doing a PhD, coming from a working class background in the northeast of England, which is traditionally an area that has high social deprivation and then low university and higher education and attainment. In case you're not from the UK, here's a little map, and that pin is my hometown, Middlesbrough. It's in an area called Cleveland, also known as Teesside. Aside from being quite a socially deprived area with high levels of unemployment, drug use and low socioeconomic attainment and low university attainment, the main things we're famous for is having this massive weird bridge that has a little carriage underneath it, and then all of the industry. So there's some of the chemical works up there. Also, lots of iron works, because iron used to be mined locally by my granddad, actually. Traditionally, the north of England and the northeast especially tend to get forgotten about when it comes to social schemes for like levelling up the socioeconomic status of various parts of the UK. So while I was growing up, we were pretty working class family. My dad was a fireman and also had lots of other jobs. And then when she was able to, my mum would have jobs as cleaners. So I ended up spending a lot of my time out in the natural world. So behind the town inland, you had the North Yorkshire moors and the Cleveland Hills, and they're spectacular and beautiful, as you can see in this picture. To the east, we had the coast, which is also spectacular and beautiful, and has this amazing succession of early to middle Jurassic sediments. I knew this is the sort of thing I was interested in, and I knew that scientists existed and people studied this as a job, but it never occurred to me that that was something I could do, because that's not what people around me did. People around me worked in factories and shops. I was quite lucky and a lot better off than other people I grew up with, because my parents would encourage this kind of thing and make sure I got to watch television programs about the natural world. So when I went to secondary school, I thought, okay, well, this is maybe where I'm going to find out how to get a job as a scientist and what I need to do. But actually, my secondary school experience was pretty horrible. So I was told I was too lazy and thick to be a scientist. People like me don't go to university, I was told, because I'm from Middlesbrough and I'm from like this kind of working class background. Science is too hard for people like me, so I should probably aim for the factories like everyone else. There was zero encouragement. Actually, quite often they would stand in my way. So I struggled a lot with maths, for example, and I asked for extra help in maths, but they wouldn't give it to me. And if you tell someone the same thing repeatedly, then they end up believing it. And that's what I believed, that I didn't have any future beyond working in a factory, that people like me don't go to university, don't become scientists. No one around me became a scientist or went to university, so there were no immediate role models. And when you watch TV, so people like Attenborough programs, everyone loves a bit of Attenborough, but Attenborough's a posh boy from the south, and people on science programs, especially on the BBC, they're all generally posh boys from the south. Representation's a bit better today, but still, people from privileged backgrounds dominate science communication. So, but that's another problem entirely, isn't it? I left school with no qualifications, so I kind of just gave up on myself, to be honest. So from the age of 18 to 29, I basically did every single unskilled, quote unquote, job that you can think of. So by the time I got to my late 20s, I was considering going to live in the forest as a hermit. And then my pal convinced me to do a degree online. As a mature student in the UK, you don't need the same qualifications you do as when you're 18. So I went to Birkbeck, University of London, who've been doing distance learning for like 180 years or something. So I started my first year and I really loved it, but I also did really, really badly at it. The three people in the photograph there, left to right, Steve Hyans, Hilary Downs and Gerald Roberts, sort of recognised that there was something weird going on and got me to speak to a specialist. And it turned out I had a load of learning difficulties. So I found out I'm dyslexic. I also have dyscalculia, dyspraxia, and I'm autistic as well. So the folks at Birkbeck were also the first people to tell me the things that I could do. The fact that like a mistake wasn't a catastrophic failure that you never recovered from. It was an intrinsic part of the learning process and that you had to make mistakes to improve. They also started telling me about things like PhDs and having a career and how to become a geologist full time because I really liked it. I proper love rocks me like. And so they actually encouraged me to apply for PhDs. In particular, they encouraged me to apply for Oxford. So I applied for Oxford. And then I got in. In fact, Oxford was the only place that even gave me an interview. I applied for 11 PhDs in the UK. And so this is, again, where the coming from a disadvantaged background plays in, because the reason I didn't get any interviews at other universities is because the criteria that they mark you on, that they judge you on, very much favour people from advantaged backgrounds. So to put it into context, I worked full-time throughout most of my undergrad degree. So I had a full-time job and then I was studying on the evenings and weekends and working overtime to pay for the degree and to pay for things like field trips and stuff. So that's what your typical Birkbeck student does. Yeah, effectively filters out people like me. So you're only going to get privileged people applying for these positions. Also, for someone like me getting to Oxford, there's no bridge. Oxford is an alien planet compared to where I'm from. One of my early experiences in Oxford was having someone from quite a privileged background tell me that I needed to lose my regional accent in order to have a career and be taken seriously. My accent's not that strong because I've had to modify it because of people like that. But even so, having someone tell me that just made me feel about as welcome as a turd in a pool party. It's also quite difficult and isolated because you don't have shared experiences in your formative years. So people will talk about the things they did growing up, and a common one is which ski resorts they liked to go to. I've never been skiing. No one I know had until I came here had been skiing. And then I would tell them stories from the sorts of things I would do when I was a kid. And that would make people from privileged backgrounds feel quite bad and they wouldn't want to hear about it because then they have to acknowledge that they're privileged. And it's not like I'm sat there going, oh, well, you're bad because you got to go skiing when you were a kid. It's just that they don't want to have to think that there are people in the UK who they are now peers with who had such alien backgrounds to them. And it is incredibly isolating because I could be in a room at a formal dinner or something or an event, social event of hundreds of people, and I'm the only person who's had my background. So I'm a very tall, hefty, bearded northern bloke. I've got a semi-permanent scowl. I've got resting misery face, as someone once said. And so people don't tend to give me hassle directly, but it must be so much more difficult for someone who doesn't have my advantages. Also, by this point, in my mid-30s, I knew who I was, I knew where I was going, I knew what I wanted to do to get there and how I would get there. So even though I felt like I didn't fit in, that there wasn't a place for me here in Oxford or in wider academia, and I still feel like there's not a place for me here, either in Oxford or wider academia, I'm bullheaded and stubborn and hard enough to just keep smashing it until I make a place for myself. This ties into things even more as you become an early career researcher and finish your PhD and try and get postdocs. Even though we all pretend that things like outreach and teaching are important, which I generally believe they are, and I know they are, the whole thing is essentially just a mill to churn out papers and keep the publishing industry going, really. And so that's why papers are the standard metric by which your worth as an academic is judged. So I finished my PhD and my funding ended in April. And so generally what's accepted is I'll spend the next few months writing papers and applying for jobs. But how am I supposed to bloody well pay for my rent? Well, I don't have family I can rely on. I don't have a safety net, so I can just sit there unemployed for months while I write papers. Current stage, I've had 27 applications and 27 rejections for postdocs or post-PhD jobs. The one bit of feedback is that I don't have papers. I haven't been able to write any papers since April because I've needed to have a job. So I've had a full-time job again, which is great. You know, I'm glad to have money. And people say, oh, that's good experience for your CV. But really, that doesn't count. No one gives a damn what about your jobs or your outreach or anything like that, or your teaching. It's just a number of papers. I've also been teaching at the colleges. So essentially, I've been working 2 full-time jobs. So I haven't been able to do any of my PhD corrections. And I haven't been able to write up any papers. So I'm still in this position where I'm not, quote unquote, qualified for a postdoc because I only have the 1 paper. And this sort of thing isn't really thought about by the wider university or academic community because it's not a concern for people who don't have a working class or underprivileged background. And that fear of unemployment is just something that people from privileged backgrounds don't have and never have and can never really understand because they've not lived through it. And because privileged people make up the bulk of academics, all the way up the scale to like the heads of department and what have you and beyond, it's just something that's not taken into account. And that benefits people from a privileged background who do get into the positions of power. And that's why academia is and continues to be the reserve of people from privileged backgrounds, especially in places like Oxford.
Thank you so much for that brilliant talk there, Brooke. That was wonderful. I'm going to move straight on to our next speaker. The next speaker is Monica Alejandra Gomez Correa, who was born in Bogota, Colombia. She started her science career by pursuing a bachelor's in geology at the National University of Colombia, Bogota in 2010. After her bachelor's studies in 2015, she did an internship at Occidental Petroleum Company and worked at the Colombian Geological Survey on projects such as the Geological Map of Colombia and South America's Geological Map. In 2017, she was selected to be part of the UNESCO Poland co-sponsored fellowship in engineering program at AGH University of Science and Technology, where she implemented and evaluated different valorization methodologies for geological interest sites in the Colombian national natural parks. She currently lives in Erlangen, Germany, where she's in her 2nd year of an international master's in geosciences in paleobiology. Her research focuses on reading the stratigraphic record, looking for clues to reconstruct environments in the past, and understand changes in ecosystems' community composition through time. As a researcher, Alejandra is just starting out, and she's currently looking for a PhD position with the motivation to continue untangling the Earth's history. Alejandra is a JEDI advocate and a GeoLatinas ambassador. She co-leads the GeoLatinas blog, a polyglot blog, where she looks for stories to close the gap between scientists and the community and inspire current and future generations. Here's her talk.
Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for the invitation to participate in this panel. Today I'm happy to talk about the intersection of our identities and how we need to move from the labels to the actions to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in the geosciences. So I would like to provide data and to talk more in detail about the numbers, talking about intersectionality. However, the studies regarding this topic are few, and this intersectionality is the new lenses through we are looking at the identities and how to promote diversity and inclusion. So first of all, I would like to talk about our identities. And we all are defined by different labels. And some of these labels are given to ourselves, and through some other labels we identify ourselves as in one of these categories. And when I'm talking about identity and the labels that we put in ourselves or that others impose in ourselves, I'm talking about sexuality, skin color, age, ability, body shape, mental health, citizenship, language, religion, education, and gender. And as you can imagine, the identity of all of us, it's not defined by just one of them, but it's more like a combination of all of these labels. And in the past decades, we have been looking at these identities and these labels in terms of privilege or power and discrimination or marginalized identities. And as you can see here in this graph, there's some identities that will allow you to have more power, and some others in the other part of the graph that will locate you in a marginalized circle. And when you try to actually locate yourself in one of these identities, you'll find that sometimes you are not just in one of these circles, in the outer circle or in the middle one, but probably you are in two. And by looking at this phenomenon that you are not belonging to just only one circle, we need to start thinking about our identity as a much more complex thing, and that actually our experiences and context will shape our identity. The life experience is shaped by the social context and the social dynamics. So at the end, we all have a complex identity, and the intersectionality is the framework to understand how a variety of oppression can intersect, but also it's the lens through which you can see where the power comes and collides, where it locks and intersects. And this is the new approach that I would like to talk a bit. And it's how all these labels interact with each other, and how we need to analyze our identities and we need to analyze our data in a much more complex scenario, and not just taking by a single category, or thinking that all the people in a certain group will have exactly the same experiences, or will experience the same things, or will have the same vehicles to reach their goals. So to be intersectional, we have to consider how a problem plays out differently from different people. So we need to integrate the experiences and these intersections in our analysis, because throughout an awareness of intersectionality, we can better acknowledge and ground the differences among us. And this is not about like getting into smaller and smaller cohorts, but it's about understanding how, by recognizing the experiences of others and their identities, we can better combine forces and work towards a more diverse, inclusive, and equitable environment. So working in intersectionality, as you see, it's a bit complex topic in terms of looking at identities as a combination of different categories. And the first thing that you have to do is acknowledge your identities. And by acknowledge your identities, I also would like to invite you to find empowerment in your identity. Find that by recognizing yourself you can actually start thinking about how you can proactively seek to eliminate unconscious bias, how you can help others in your situation or in different situations, and to have a better experience. And also another powerful tool is listening and learn from others, and be empathetic. We need to learn to listen to experiences that are not related to us. There is also an exercise to eliminate your unconscious bias. And by listening to others' experience, you will be able to also recognize the intersections. And here it's not only important how intersectional is your identity. It's something that you have to somehow take in account, but it's about how intersectional is your analysis. Think if you are talking with a certain group, think how can I make this experience more intersectional? Where I can find other experiences, how can I integrate this? And think about the vehicles in those intersections. So, for example, if you are working in promoting or engage more international students at your institution, you will have to think about the different groups that you already have in those international student category. What are the difficulties that some of them will have? And think about all the possible or as many intersections as you can, and try to work together, create coalition. There's many people working promoting equity, diversity, and inclusion, and this work will be easier, will be better if we all work together and take action. The small actions at the end will make a big change. And just as a reminder, that working in intersectionality, it's about promoting equity, and it is important to understand that this will give us an advantage in terms of the solutions that came out from this analysis. And thank you so much again for your attention, and I will be happy to answer some of the questions in the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandra, for that vital talk. Really, really useful. I'm going to move on to our final speaker of today, and then we're going to jump into the panel session. So again, if you have any questions for the panelists, please pop them into the Q&A. We will try and get to as many as we can, okay? So our final speaker today is Dr. Craig Poku, who is a postdoctoral researcher in climate sciences at the University of Leeds, who identifies as a queer, Black, British, cis male. He completed an undergraduate degree in mathematics from King's College London, where he obtained a first-class honours. In 2015, he moved to Leeds, where he went on to complete a PhD in atmospheric sciences, which focused on improving UK fog forecasts by understanding how to improve fog microphysics. Following his PhD, he now works on similar research with a focus on fog over northern India. Over the last few years, Craig has developed an interest in understanding the intersection between race and climate. He's passionate to discuss how representation in climate sciences could be improved, leading to him to co-lead projects such as the Black in Geosciences Week. In his spare time, he likes to get creative, which sees him regularly bake and take up activities such as theatre and pottery. So Craig, if you could turn your camera and your mic on, and we would love to hear your reflections thus far.
Hold on. I can't turn my camera on, sorry.
Elspeth, maybe?
1 second, sorry. There we go, I've just asked you to start your video there.
Thank you. Awesome. Good afternoon, everybody. So firstly, thank you, Hazel, for introducing me. So I'm Dr. Craig Poku, and I'm going to be talking about queer representation within geosciences. my queerness cannot be unentangled from my blackness. So I grew up in South East London for the majority of my life. And the one thing to note is that as a black male growing up in London, I was surrounded by quite a lot of homophobic language within the black community, whereby the idea of people being differing from the idea of straight, cis, male, anything that diverted from that image of blackness was seen as a weakness, was seen as a way in which people felt that they couldn't belong. And so despite the fact that I was really confident in my blackness, despite the fact that I was really confident in me as a person, my queerness in conjunction with my blackness made me feel that I lost my sense of identity. And so when I came to university and then decided at that point that I felt comfortable to come out as bisexual at the time, I found that maybe joining the LGBTQ plus society at the time would have been a good way for me to not only be able to embrace my queerness, but also come across other people of color. Unfortunately, that was not the case. And the one thing that I found during this period was that whilst in the black community, I faced a lot of homophobia, within the queer community, I faced a lot of racism, and a lot of the microaggressions, for some reason, queer people felt that even because they were queer and they only fell into one particular marginalized group, that it gave them the excuse to then make comments such as, ooh, I've never been with a black person before, ooh, blah, ooh, oh, there's only one of you doing this subject, that isn't a black person thing to do. And so I thought that maybe, just maybe, if I got through this really difficult period of trying to, I guess, deal with the fact that I was a queer person of color, that by the time I joined a field such as geosciences, that actually that may not be the case. And unfortunately, these experiences got worse. Now, the reality is that in my department, I was one of 3 Black British people to be graduating with a PhD in atmospheric sciences from the University of Leeds. And so the idea of my colleagues coming across anybody who is Black British was quite rare. It then obviously, when you then obviously have the additional layer of being queer on top of that, I then found that it became a very difficult space to navigate. And so what I then found was then a lot of the times whenever I would talk about EDI issues, especially from the perspective of race, that a lot of my colleagues will essentially go, oh, but Craig, you are so flamboyant, or Craig, you are so open. And so therefore they would use that as an excuse to essentially go, we're not going to talk about either your queerness as well as your blackness. And what makes it even more concerning is that a lot of the EDI initiatives and EDI roles in universities may be run by queer people, but who also have the privilege of being white. And the reason why I like to highlight this problem sometimes is because from my experiences of being within the queer community, because a lot of people identify as white that I've come across, as well as also being queer, they then don't realize that their privilege of their whiteness can actually then distort their views of progress in terms of actually trying to speak for all people who fall under the EDI category. And so I guess where my sort of viewpoint is that we are now at a stage whereby there are multiple resources in terms of what we can do to actually help our white allies, both from a race perspective as well as a queer perspective. And there are other marginalized groups, such as people who've got disabilities and the way in which we utilize language, that we now need to not only start telling people this is what you can do to be better allies, but they need to actually make actionable steps. So thank you for my very brief kind of introduction to this, and I'm willing to take any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Craig. That was wonderful. Okay, so we're going to launch into the panel section of today's session 2. So if I could get all of the panelists now to turn on their cameras and their microphones, that would be great. I think there's going to be turned on as we go. So, and we have some questions from the audience. Again, if you do have any questions, please pop it into the Q&A and we will do our best to get through as many as we can, whilst keeping an eye on the time. So. Excellent, a couple more. Okay, so whilst the last couple of cameras are coming on, I'm just going to start us off with the first question, which is actually a general question, which is open to anyone in the panel that would like to answer it. If no one jumps in, I will direct it to someone initially. But yes, please feel free to give your input on this. And it's actually a question that we had outlined, but has been asked fantastically by an audience member who has said, I have heard people say that there is no point in attending this kind of webinar because they're not senior enough to change their workplace culture. How do you respond to this, and why is it important for the majority of people to get involved in these conversations? Does anyone want to jump in on that question? Susan, yeah.
I'll take that one on. It's something that we deal with all the time. And, you know, I've got to say, I'm really heartened that with a big conference, the Canadian Institute of Mining invited us to give our course. And we were expecting an all-female audience. And we walked into that room, and I'm so sad I didn't take a photo, because it was diverse in sexual identity, in gender, in race, and it was a beautiful crowd to talk to, and the men participated wholeheartedly in a lot of the discussions and learned and admitted that they were learning a lot of information. I think it's important that everybody participate, of course, but you know, you need to start local. You need to start within your sphere of influence. You need to find the influencers too and pull them into the conversation. And bystandership and allyship, it spreads organically once somebody steps up and shows that type of behavior. Other people can gain that courage too within that workplace, within that environment.
Great, thank you. Kaheli, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, my response to that question would be, I think, perfectly encapsulated in this quote by Alice Walker that says, the most common way that people give up their power is by believing that they don't have any. And I think that is something every single audience member here needs to take away. It does not matter that you're not quote unquote senior, because you have power in numbers. When an entire group of graduate students, when an entire group of junior faculty is united in a certain message, that is what often puts pressure on leadership to change policies, to allocate funding and resources, not because they suddenly had a change of heart and became more aware or woke people overnight. It is because of pressure from people across the universities, from the institutions at junior ranks, that this happens. So please don't think that you don't have the power, you do.
Excellent. Anjana, did you want to add?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And one of the key things is don't be put off if you are young or you don't have the experience, because what really matters is that look at who is in those seats of power. So in the natural heritage sector in the UK, you look at the boards, they are mostly middle class, white, elderly men. Now, one of the biggest influences in the natural heritage and conservation sector, I think, in the UK is Maya Rose Craig, and she's known as Bird Girl UK. She's an 18-year-old and she's making huge changes in the sector. She's also on the Women of Power list for BBC Radio 4. So you need to bring those lived experiences to the forefront, go on social media, talk directly to those senior level positions. They are all on Twitter. They will listen to you. If you have something to say, they need to listen. Just so use those cues, you know, from those really powerful influencers that are really making changes, because if you follow in their footsteps, you will too.
Does anyone else want to add? Martin, yes?
I think it's embracing, if you've got a condition or you're a marginalised group, understanding out a lot more, so then you can communicate and share it with other people. And then you will win allies, and then you will get in those doors to talk to people like leaders and directors. I mean, as much as I'm struggling at work, I do have avenues to directors and I'm making an influence, but it's a very, very slow progress. But keep going.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay, I have a follow-up question. Kind of related, but specifically this question was for Brooke. You mentioned how privilege can be uncomfortable for people to think about, and it's often thought of as a negative thing. But acknowledging your privilege is about accepting your advantages, and by someone saying that they don't have privilege, it suggests that there are no structural or systemic problems. But we know that these issues exist and need to be addressed. How can people start to move forward past that uncomfortable feeling of acknowledging their privilege and start understanding it to help better support minority geoscientists?
I think privilege gets set up as being something that's like, it's bad to have it. Like it intrinsically is bad and makes the person who has the relative privilege a bad person. And in my experience, a lot of that sense of it is generated by people who don't believe in DEI work within, say, like somewhere like Oxford. So it's getting past that conversation and understanding that it's relative as well. It doesn't, just because I'm more privileged than someone else doesn't automatically make me a bad person at all. So in the example I used about the skiing trip conversations, it's like, yeah, those people aren't necessarily bad, and I'm not saying that it's like they're bad people for having had that experience. That's just something that they've generated that they feel embarrassed about. I don't know if that's like a British thing or a UK thing though, to be like embarrassed of success or like having a better situation. I mean, I'm definitely relatively privileged in all the experiences I've had, especially because doing a degree and coming to Oxford has completely changed my life compared to the peers I grew up with. But it's, the more you talk about it, I guess, is the short version, the more it's going to be normalized, and that's what you should really do. I mean, someone says they go skiing, cool, I'd like to have that experience. But then also me talking about going on holiday to the local seaside town because that's what was available. It's like, that's not something I'm ashamed of or that's bad, or that other people should feel bad for me because I had a great time. I don't know, it's not a very good example, but talking about it more, normalizing things by talking about them without those kind of assumed power structures, I guess.
Yeah, great, thank you. Craig?
This is mostly a follow-up from what Brooke has just said. I think the way that I've seen it is that there are a number of people who are aware that they have privilege, but are sometimes too scared to say the wrong things. And the reason as to why I say that is because I have the privilege that I'm a cis male, but I also don't have other privileges. And I'm aware that some of the language that I may use as an example may be inherently misogynistic, or sometimes the way in which I use language is quite ableist, and I don't even realize it because it's basically systemed into the way that I think. But it's acknowledging the fact that it's not to say, oh no, I want you to give me a pity card, but it's me saying it's something I'm actively working on, and you find that I'm more willing to give somebody the time of day when I can see that they are actively stopping, trying to think through these things and then make a change, than for somebody who goes, I can't be asked, I can't be doing with it. And I've definitely found that for those who are sort of in the, I like to consider it like a journey where you've got like the woke white right at the beginning. I find that a lot of the times where people are kind of scared is the fact that they may make mistakes, or that they feel that they're going to be told you're incorrect, when in actual fact, by you actively engaging in this conversation, it then means that you then know where you can find the right resources to actually start thinking about it. And I think that having that kind of dialogue would then mean that people are then less afraid to then know that they are trying to make progress. So that's really my 2 cents on that.
That's great, thank you. Actually, I would just jump across to Martin with that as well, because the idea of terminology and people being afraid of using the right or the wrong language is something you mentioned in your talk as well, of not being afraid of the D word.
Yep.
Do you have anything as well to add to this?
I think it's confronting it in the face. Well, I would, because I've come to terms with my disabilities, and like recently someone said to me, oh, you've worked really hard and it's amazing what you can put your mind to. And I sort of said to them, it's not about my mind, it's there's all these barriers what Henrietta was talking about earlier, we're faced with these barriers that we can't see, that make life very difficult for us to navigate through in geoscience communities, to get through to those people. But I think we just have to confront them,
Mm-hmm.
and then find allies who will help us, bring role models. And as I think Brooke was alluding to, that there's very few who are in disabilities or in our sector, so we either can ignore all these aggressions, or we can be seen as the angry, grumpy person. I mean, I never want to be like that. But, sorry.
No, absolutely. I'm just going, we've got so many questions coming in now. I just wanted to ask another one here that is specifically we've had a couple of questions around the leaky pipeline. And so I would like to throw this open again to the group, because I know this is an issue that a lot of you have familiarity with. And so the question is around, in general, there's a focus on attracting and recruiting new students and employees into geoscience. But does anyone know of more strategic efforts to re-attract minority groups that may have left the workplace due to the leaky pipeline? And tethered to that is another question that we had relating to specific advice that you may have for someone who is a part of many underrepresented identity groups and communities, is a geoscientist with a PhD, but is currently unemployed. So how do you avoid becoming a part of the leaky pipeline if you don't want to? Does anyone have anything they would like to throw back for that? Anjana, yeah?
I think the latter question is quite interesting. So this is a person who is potentially dropping out of the pipeline due to the systemic problems that many of us have touched on. I think people like myself who have quite a lot of experience in the sector, so we built up the connections, we built up the years and years of resilience of going through all sorts of systemic oppression. We need to be putting that ladder out and pulling those candidates up with us. So we need to be extending offers of mentorship, of coaching. We need to take time. And I know this is a difficult thing to ask. And I know it myself because I've got 3 children, I've got a job, I got all sorts of stuff going on, but I coach and I mentor young people like that to stay in the system. Whatever I can do to help to give my expertise and my knowledge over 20 years of wisdom in the sector, I will do it. And I think the responsibility lies with people like myself to offer that olive branch out. And you shouldn't have to wait to be approached. You should be actively offering your services on social media where those young people are. So you are offering those services of mentoring and coaching. And I know people are saying, I don't have the time, I don't have the time either, but you have to make the time, because if we don't, we will lose those people out of the pipeline.
Great. Thank you, Anjana. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add about the leaky pipeline? Yes, Craig?
I think when I think about why I'm fortunately not unemployed at this point, although I'm currently looking for a new job, is simply because I've been fortunate to be in the right place in the right time. And so the way in which the system kind of works against me, I'm fortunate that I've got people who have privilege to be able to use that to kind of boost me up. And the reason as to why I think mentorship is really important is because sometimes it's not nice being the only person in the room. So there's a person that I listen to called Kelechi Okafor, who does a brilliant podcast called Say Your Mind. And one thing that she really highlighted in one of the episodes that stuck with me is that there's some people who fall into an underrepresented group who want to only be the only person in the room. They want to have that power. And the reason I like to highlight that is because what you then find is that and this goes back to the whole idea of not just mentorship, but also picking mentors that are right for you. So for people who are listening to this, who are looking for mentors, find people who actually want to give it back to you, and find people who are wanting to actually embrace you as opposed to just wanting to be the only person in the room. You'll find that you actually can kind of separate the two together. But I find that having people who want to really make change as well as also connecting people with people who may not be able to help them get that change. So example, connecting them with more kind of like privileged people, as I like to kind of think of it, in my network. And having people who want to empower mentorship, I think, is sort of the way to kind of address the leaky pipeline as it currently stands, because I can't think of a better system. That was a really rambled for more ramble than it should have been, but I hope I kind of made sense in that.
No, it was good. I liked it. It was a good one. I'm going to pivot slightly because I feel like a lot of the things that we're touching on here have these issues that many people have raised in their presentations earlier around this idea of complexity and intersectionality. So I just have a question for Alejandra. In your talk, you really highlighted the complexity of people's identities and how, by all of us listening and understanding them better, we can make geoscience a more inclusive place. How can we as a community move more towards this intersectional approach? And why is it an important part of our conversations around diversity and inclusion?
Question, and I think here we are a clear example on what we can do. So here in this panel, we have so many different identities that for me it's inspiring to see how all of us have different experiences. And one of the actions that we as community can do, it's like show the identities of people, show that every one of us is different and has different experiences, and also start collaborating. Yeah, I think I'm the youngest here in her research state, and so mentoring could be such a powerful tool. So it's not only about like showing different people who's already in the field, but also mentoring. And yeah, I think with those two actions, we can start like building up a different environment in geosciences.
Great. Yes, Martin.
I totally agree. Because we're all intersectional, I think we shouldn't almost go on our own hobby horse like disability or LGBT, but we should be proactive allies for all this, for the whole movement of EDI, rather than fighting our own individual cause. Because I'm a big advocate for all this EDI movement, because your wars are not, if you pardon them, the military analogy, your wars are not my wars, but we're all fighting the same battle for greater inclusivity in the sector.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to pick up as well on something that you've all kind of mentioned in little places too here, is this idea of mentoring and finding support. One of the questions that we've had from an audience member is that they are the only person in their category in a department that is all white males, and they feel very frustrated and tired of trying to make change and make connections. And this is causing them to think of leaving academia, even though they have a relatively senior and established status. And I suppose what I'm enjoying from this, they kind of ask for ideas, but also I'm interested in hearing the panel's thoughts on, if you are that one person in a room. I know Anjana's already mentioned reaching out on social media to try and find mentors in your space, but do you have any other advice to find those mentors, to find those networks, if you don't have them already, if you're that one person in a room? Craig?
So firstly, I'm actually going to also agree with Anjana and say that Twitter was the best thing that could have happened for me in terms of finding mentorships, mostly because I definitely found that I was the only person in the field that I was, and it sucked. It really did. But I definitely found that actually being able to join a space where I found very like-minded people, where I actually found some really brilliant mentors. Shout out to Sam Giles if she's listening to this. the fact is that without Twitter, I wouldn't have found these people. And actually through Twitter, I then ended up joining organizations such as the African Caribbean Research Collective. I ended up joining other organizations such as Black British STEM, the minorities in STEM. I found that my networks then grew, and then through doing that, then I was able to then find an aspect of feeling grounded, even if I was the only person. But the second thing as well is opportunity. I mean, it's a bit more difficult now because obviously we're pretty much virtual, but opportunities to actually network, opportunities to be able to meet other young people. So young people is the wrong word. As an example, we do the Royal Met Soc Student Conference, and that's a really good opportunity for people to network, because actually you then find that if you are the one of, say, the person doing meteorology at Leeds, but you're also the one person doing meteorology at Reading, you're both Black, you go to this conference, you'll then come across each other. So conferencing, networking opportunities is always a good way as well. But from a more kind of like financial constraint thing, Twitter is something I do recommend strongly. So yeah.
Great, thanks. Angela, yes?
In that particular situation where you are in a departmental setting and not feeling the support from your cohort, I would go straight above that to the senior leadership and demand of the senior leaders that action be taken to embed that inclusive thought leadership within the organisation. I think it's got to come from the very top levels, and that demonstration and commitment to EDI from that top level will filter down. And I say this because I've been working with, as an EDI consultant, with various companies and organizations where I'm working with founders, with the directors of the companies to basically draw down that inclusive thought leadership down to the very level of, you know, directors all the way to members of staff, you know, on shop floors. So I would recommend to that person they go directly to the head of department or a senior director level and absolutely campaign for that to be a thread that runs through the organization. So the senior leaders are demonstrating by example how thought leadership needs to thread through the organization, and then you will start seeing people coming on board because their senior leadership are demonstrating from the very top.
Excellent. Yeah. Martin?
Yeah, it's a combined answer from what we've just heard. When I was unemployed about 2 years ago, someone just said to me, I've just thought about blogging. So I just started blogging on LinkedIn. And that's how I increased my network of people like-minded like myself, or neurodiversity friends and geoscience friends. And then when I got employed in July 2018, about 4 months later, all my directors at Covey started reading these. And then now today, I'm missing a whole EDI session at work because things that have been put in place about 2 years ago, which is really encouraging. And the speaker's saying it's for a greater good that I'm here, promoting it in a bigger sense. But it's just getting those network opportunities and being those seeds and catalysts. We may not see what's happening, but if we're shaking the right fruit off the trees for the directors, and they will take notice. But as I say, it's a slow battle, but
yeah,
it does work.
Great, thank you. And Susan, I have a question for you actually that relates to both of those things in terms of getting buy-in and engagement from senior leadership or from other members of your community that maybe don't traditionally participate in EDI activities. You mentioned you had this really fantastic, diverse turnout to your event. How do you achieve that in an environment where maybe people are less willing to get involved?
It's certainly challenging, and as I said, we were so surprised and so happy that that's exactly what had happened. And I think it's, it comes down to our engagement being more about the allyship and the bystanders and appealing to the majority. There are lots of research on, formerly they used to give a lot of talks about, say, sexual harassment in the workplace to workers. And they found that for the majority that attended these courses, they didn't feel engaged because they were neither the target nor were they the harasser. So it was geared towards two people in the room, and everybody else felt, unaffected by what was being discussed. So it's turning the conversation around and appealing more to the majority and talking about safe and respectful and inclusive workplaces. And everybody feels, in mining, we are a male-dominated industry. And when I first started Me Too Mining, we were focused on women in the industry. And then I started seeing other numbers and saying, and this is part of our messaging, is that the majority of workers are male, and they can experience, I've seen some studies, 15 to 20% sexual harassment and sexualized violence in the workplace also. And so that's a lot of men being impacted by these behaviors. So our audience is not just the women, it is the men, and educating them about what exactly these are so they recognize it when it happens to them also. Everybody wants everybody else to be safe. So if you make those appeals, if you have those conversations, you find the leaders, you find the champions, and they draw in others around them too. So it's spreading the word, it's having those challenging conversations, telling your stories, and spreading it organically so that it's not a forced feeling. It is pulling somebody into their discomfort. So you have to do it with that awareness, and they will come. They will want to support everybody around them.
There was something in JOLSOC recently that I had to challenge one of the authors who wrote an article, and I felt quite intimidated because it was from Oxford University. So, and I don't want to mention names, but I just didn't want to say anything about. I didn't want to say much positive about. Well, it was a very positive article, but it mentioned something that really offended me, to be honest. But I just felt I had to write them an email to tell them how I felt. And I think we just have to be proactive when something. Because we won't make change if we're silent. Sometimes we have to be proactive and stand our ground, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of uncomfortable conversations, and also again kind of aligning with this idea of mentorship, Kuhali, I have a question for you that is relating to a very recent controversial article that discussed that mentorship stated women benefit more from a male mentor. And there was a lot of online discussion as to why this statement was harmful and didn't help with progress, maybe how the data had been interpreted incorrectly. And the paper only used female and male gender identities, excluding all other gender identities. With so many conversations taking place around the importance of diverse representation in having real value in bringing a much more representative group of geoscientists into the field, what are your thoughts about why articles like this are still appearing?
So this particular article in question, the Al-Shebly article, I think the main problem, or one of, I mean, there were more than one problem, but I think one of the main issues was that they conflated association with causation. And so therefore they interpreted their results in a way that said something like, women actually, female mentors actually are detrimental to women and so on, without taking into account the bigger picture. I mean, they looked, I think, at citations and publications and so on. And, men are much more likely to cite their own work compared to women. Women are often excluded from various informal networks, power dynamics, especially at the highest levels where you have mostly senior white cisgender able-bodied men. So it was there, that association and causation that led to this very flawed interpretation. And I think the analogy that I like to offer, when discussing this particular paper, is that a few years ago, my colleagues and I, using Lamont's data set, we did a study on gender differences, gender bias in letters of recommendation. And what we found is that across the board, regardless of the world region we looked at, or regardless of the gender of the letter writer, men were more likely to be praised as being brilliant and star, and women praised as being reliable and nurturing. And I think the analogy would be if we had taken all of that and said, well, since everybody writes stronger letters for men, therefore men must be better scientists. So I think that's the problem with the Al-Shebly paper. I mean, maybe and there wasn't enough detail in there to go into a granular level about a lot of things. And of course, things like, just using a binary like a male versus female identity and not looking at everything else. So I think there were various problems with that paper and not enough detail to allow us to go into why such a thing was happening rather than the most superficial level, because what they effectively did is looked at the most superficial manifestation of the problem and say, aha, this is what the issue is, rather than going into a granular or deeper level. And I think this speaks to the larger issue of, I think, you know, their analogy, their result, that therefore women are, you know, harmed by female mentors. I think the larger issue, when we take one step back and look at the theme of a conference like today, especially our session, in terms of addressing barriers, in terms of intersectionality, you know, unless in every single one of these spaces we have people represented from different groups, and that could be race, that could be gender, that could be sexual and gender identity, that could be ability status, it could be whatever, you know, there is a much longer list. And I think one quick thing that all of us can do is just imagine, and for some people they don't even have to imagine because, you know, it's their reality, like, you know, what if you were the only person of that group in the entire larger space? What if you were the only white person in that entire department? What if you were, like, you know, what if you were the only male in that entire department? And then get a sense of what that must be like for those who are from the different groups. And I think unless people are willing to take ownership of what's going on below the surface, you know, in terms of not just looking at, you know, in my presentation, I gave that iceberg analogy compared to race. And I think the equivalent of the Al-Shebli paper is they looked at the tip of the iceberg. They didn't look at what was going on underneath. And until all of us commit to looking at what is going on underneath, we're only going to see cosmetic changes and, you know, superficial advancements.
Great. Thank you so much. We're kind of coming towards the end of the panel session now. So I would like to give you all one last comment to make before we wrap up. And I have a question to pose to you all to answer for me, if you will, if you feel comfortable, or you can say something else if you'd rather. But the question I'd like to pose to you is, as we continue to discuss these challenges and become more aware of various issues, especially those that are intersectional and more complex, what would you like to see from the geoscience community as a whole? So I'd like to start with Brooke, please. Oh, you're muted, sorry.
Every time.
Check your Zoom bingo. Ding.
So, you know, wider recognition that things like inclusion and diversity work is worthwhile. I mean, I know it is, we know it is, but then, as I said in my talk, like, it doesn't count for anything with my career going forward. So how much faster would things change if people who thought that way were able to progress through their careers? So definitely that from the start, and not just kind of like get a certificate at the end of the year when they say, you know, thanks for all this stuff you've done for us, essentially. Because that's what it tends to get used for, I find, is like to make the institute or the company look good, as opposed to any kind of almost performative. Yeah, and then to build up for them to build on that, so that next year someone doesn't have to essentially go over the same path again and again and again, and there is progress.
Great, thank you. Angela?
I think my take on this is starting at that very beginning of that journey in childhood experiences. And there was a question here about access to nature and green spaces, because this is where the love for geosciences and physical geography begins. And what we need to do is we need to help the people in power on those senior level board positions who are managing organizations that are looking after natural landscapes, or head of departments. We need to help those people become our allies. They need to step into the shoes of those who are disadvantaged from underserved backgrounds in order to understand what the barriers are. Because once they understand those barriers, they can then work within their structures, within their teams, and advocate for dismantling the barriers to enhance access to nature from a very young age, which then leads to opening up pathways to access careers in geosciences.
Excellent, thank you. Susan.
I think it's just stepping out of our comfort zone and getting everybody to stand up and say something. We all have challenges with intersectionality, as Alejandra was talking about. And it's stepping out of that, looking around us, looking for the only in the room and engaging with them and bringing them in to the room so that they don't feel so isolated and out of place, as I've often felt in meetings in engineering firms. But standing up and flexing those muscles and building your safety toolkit, as it were, with some of these bystander intervention strategies, some of these allyships. Educate yourself on challenges that others may face in the workplace, and learn about how to be a better ally, because there are things that I learned in my research that had never occurred to me, and skills that were there that I think everybody should know. So it's self-education and stepping out of your own comfort zone and stepping into other spaces.
Excellent, thank you. Martin?
What can I say? I think it's the same to everyone. Never assume anything, because you can see things on the surface, especially these conversations, what we're doing over the internet, but even less so, well, when we're at conferences, meeting people one-to-one, just never assume something. And someone directly used to say to me, if you assume something, it makes an ass of you and me. And I always remember that. So just talk to that person, because they may be hurting inside and they won't, what we just said, just talk to the people that are marginalized or underrepresented.
Great, thank you. Alejandra?
Okay. I think I would like to see more diverse role models, and I would also like to be one. I always think about my cousins and think that I'm the role model for them. I would like also to like geosciences to be a strong community, a supportive community, because as many of us already mentioned, and also in the questions that we got on the panel, a lot of times we feel isolated, and we should have more support from our community, and we are not alone. I mean, all of us have different experiences, but at the same time, we have so many things in common, and we should work towards helping others to have their best experiences, and also for us to have our best experiences. Yeah, and we also need more allies.
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Koheli?
Yeah, one thing I would really like to see is to have every single geoscience department revise their hiring and promotion criteria to formally include DEI work. Because for one thing, it's mostly underrepresented groups that carry the entire burden of DEI activities. And often there isn't any formal recognition for it. So you're doing this huge service that involves a huge amount of emotional labor. And the department is saying, oh, great, thanks, but it's not getting you anywhere. And research has shown that it is underrepresented groups that do most of this work. Currently, when you look at hiring and promotion criteria, what are they looking at? They're looking at publications, they're looking at grant funding, they're looking at teaching evaluations and coursework. And so if there is any real commitment to DEI in any of these departments, all they need to do, or one of the key things they can do, is incorporate DEI into these criteria, which means automatically it's going to help towards the advancement of underrepresented groups. And I think the other really important thing is for people from majority groups, whatever that is, to take ownership of the problem, because otherwise it ends up remaining something that underrepresented groups bear the burden of in the hope of getting some allies from majority groups, rather than having majority groups say, we need to own this issue.
Excellent, thank you. And Craig?
If there's anything that I would advise, I would say that diversity in your team will result in better research. With those life experiences that every single person has, you then find that they have a different angle or a different way in which they're going to approach the problem. you will find that the different ways in which they then approach the problem will not only give you different research outcomes, but will actually strengthen the way in which you deliver your research. But it's not as simple as just going, oh, cool, I'm going to have on my recruitment application that I'm going to be hiring somebody from an underrepresented group. If you are in a position of power where you fall into the majority such that you find that I want to actively work on improving diversity in my teams, one thing you need to also do is look at how maybe the way in which you're utilizing language is then actually then potentially going to be deterring people of color, as an example, from these positions. Because what you don't want to do is say you've got this diverse team, but you've got a super hostile environment, especially in the case where, for example, Black women get it so crap in the workplace, they still have their hair touched, they still get compared to the janitor. And you've got all of these organizations that are bringing in Black women as an example, but not also acknowledging the fact that they still have a hostile environment. So those are my two take-home messages, and I feel that this could be definitely applicable to geosciences.
Excellent, yeah. Thank you. Okay, so that kind of brings us to the end of session 2 of the EDIG conference of 2020. So I want to close this session firstly by thanking all of the panelists, Susan Lomas, Koheli Dutt, Martin Griffin, Anjana Katwa, Brooke Johnson, Alejandra Gomez Correa, and Craig Poku for being so open and courageous in sharing your experiences and knowledge with all of us today. So thank you so much. I also want to say a big thank you to the EDIG team working behind the scenes, including Aileen, Elspeth, Jess, and Anna for keeping us all moving so smoothly today. Session 3 will start tomorrow at 12 midday GMT, and it will take a closer look at what can be done to improve accessibility in fieldwork, academia, and industry, using specific examples from past work. The EDIG workshop, sponsored by IGI and ICRAG, will be in the afternoon and will explore unconscious bias, and is tailored for EDIG conference specifically using their recent survey results, which will also be made available next year. As we mentioned at the top of this session has been recorded and will be made available in the beginning of the new year. So keep an eye on the EDIG website for updates about that. But otherwise, thank you so much everyone for joining us today. Stay safe, have a great winter season if we don't see you before then. But otherwise, thank you very much. Bye.